is he's here with us, and we really respect his representation of Ammon Bundy in the most recent trial in Portland. But we have to balance all of that with he spent time as an intern with President Clinton. So, folks, you decide how much we appreciate.
There's a white Jeep F3 out there with this light still on.
If you brought a white F3 Jeep and would like for it to start when you go home, you might want to go out there. Your lights are on, is what I'm trying to say. All right. With all the banter, the Frim, the Fally, Morgan Philpott, it's all yours.
Yeah.
Would you bring your own fan club? Did they know where this is going to be a question and answer scenario?
No.
Did you know that?
I had no idea.
Neither did I. There's a pink, let me start over. There's a young lady in a pink jacket who's missing her parents. So if you brought a young lady and you don't have her, you might want to come back here. Morgan, it's all yours. I'm out of here.
All right. Thank you. I really don't have a fan club. That is support for the political prisoners that are now over in both Oregon and Pahrump, Nevada at this point in time still. To be very honest, all right, louder. Okay. Very honestly, you know what the first thing I wanted to do was when I got up here? I don't know if I can do it now because so many of you are hanging out in the back. I was going to turn around and do a selfie right here to have proof of the crowd, because I read this article coming over here about how there was going to be 400 people in a 900-person occupancy building, which I thought was very typical of media coverage thus far relative to those men and women who have put their life and time on the line to bring these issues to the forefront. Right there? All right, does that help? Closer is better. I want to first remark, can you believe that we even have to be here? Think about this for a moment. Right now, the man who we have come to celebrate is dead. There are men in jail in Nevada. Now, any of you who have met those who are subject to the prosecution by the government right now, any of you who have met Jeanette Finicum or LaVoy's children, you know that there's something different about them. That LaVoy should not be dead, that his wife should not be carrying on his legacy or have to, because he should be doing it. Have you met Ammon Bundy? The man should not be in jail. He should be with his children. Woo. And the fact that they are where they are right now is truly unbelievable to me. I don't care what political spectrum you come from. You have to notice there's something different about these people. And yet here we are today, trying to make the best we can of a very unfortunate circumstance. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be able to serve, to have served both the Bundy family and the Finicum family as their attorney. I'm grateful to be able to help out Jeanette with her BLM case, which is, being an attorney sometimes is not always that exciting. It's grueling work. It's reading a lot of stuff. It's spending a lot of time going through very tedious discovery information and appearing day after day in a courtroom where the government doesn't want you to win and will do everything they can to make sure you don't. But fortunately, where is Jeff Banta? Where's Ken Medenbach? Are they still here tonight? That's right, not guilty. You gotta love that. Shauna Cox. Neil Wampler, is he here tonight as well?
He is.
Excellent. What a privilege it was to sit in that courtroom for those many months, and then to have the opportunity to get out and help the Finicum family. How many of you have read your Bible lately? I have to admit, before I became an attorney, I was an activist. And I spent 16 years in politics thinking I could do something to make a difference. I served in the Utah State Legislature for a while. I got out. It's what motivated me to become an attorney. And I thought that I could, spend some time trying to liberate the captive. I've spent a lot of time trying to change the system, and one thing has become abundantly clear. You can't do it through one particular person or by even electing a particular person. It requires a different kind of effort, and I want to bring a little bit of that up before I get into some elements of the future pending case. There's a great section in 1 Kings 21. You ever heard of Naboth? How about Naboth's vineyard? No. Anyone? Naboth's vineyard. Okay. Naboth was a landowner, and he had a very beautiful vineyard. And the king of Israel at the time was Ahab. And Ahab saw his vineyard, and he wanted it. And so he went to Naboth and he said, hey, I will give you money or another piece of land for your vineyard. And Naboth refused him. And so Ahab went home, and his wife, appropriately named Jezebel for some reason, you can't make this stuff up, right, says to him, what are you upset about? And he says, well, Naboth will not sell me his vineyard. And Jezebel says, don't worry. So Jezebel goes out and she says, bring Naboth in front of the people and send these two men to accuse him. Call him a man who blasphemes the Lord. And then they will take him and stone him to death. And they did. The two men went out. They accused Naboth. And he was taken before the people and stoned and killed. And guess who got his vineyard? Ahab got Naboth's vineyard. Now similarly, if you go over to Nehemiah, in Nehemiah you have the people of the Jews lamenting that their children are being born into bondage and into slavery, that they have no more land to call their own because their land has been mortgaged by who? Their government. And now they're paying taxes to the government in an effort to preserve their own land. Our situation today is not unique. I want to read you one more thing from 1768. This comes from a guy named Silas Downer. Now, I could replace just a couple words in here, and it would sound almost exactly like the predicament Western landowners face today, or as the government would like to call you, a permittee. We, His Majesty's subjects who live remote from the throne and are inhabitants of a new world, are here met together to dedicate the Tree of Liberty. On this occasion, we cheerfully recognize our allegiance to our sovereign Lord, George III, King of Great Britain, and Supreme Lord of these dominions, but utterly deny any other dependence on the inhabitants of that island than what is mutual and reciprocal between all mankind. It is good for us to be here, to confirm one another in the principles of liberty, and to renew our obligations to contend earnestly therefor. Now, just like in 1768, as they began to lament the imperial control of American lands, so Western landowners for generations have lamented federal control. And we finally, after a fairly long respite after the Sagebrush Rebellion, got a group of men who were willing to stand up and engage in direct action to do something about that. And that was not received well by the federal government. But direct action is simply one element of what must be done. Direct action alone is not enough. One, it's going to take a fairly large critical mass for it to work. I want to propose to you that there are a few things that also need to go along with that direct action. And specifically, if you're going to engage in direct action, there are multiple types of political action that must take place alongside of it. So first, most of you are here today, I assume, to get a little bit informed or to get somebody else who's with you informed. Perhaps to take the information that you glean to someone else and inform them. You know, there's a great leader I look up to who says, first you get informed, second you get educated, and third you get organized. Well, after you've gotten a little bit informed, you need to get your neighbors educated and informed. And let me ask you something. I have a good friend who helped participate in the Bundy trial. He's not here tonight. His name is Rick. And along with Marcus Mumford, who was co-counsel and incredible attorney in the Bundy trial as well. And these two gentlemen put in an unbelievable amount of time. Marcus, of course, got tased, as you know, and tackled by federal marshals for his work and is now being prosecuted by the government for his activism and representation of the Bundys in court. My friend Rick told me, he said, look, I've got a metaphor that I use to represent kind of what the problem is that we have with the government today. And he uses the days of the week as this metaphor. And I'm going to start with Tuesday because I want you to think about Monday when we come back to it. To give you an idea of the challenges we face. Tuesday, I'll use to represent civics. Who teaches civics in America today, generally? What do you think? Where do most people learn of civics? I'll use Tuesday because Tuesday's the day we vote. Wednesday. Let's use Wednesday to represent health and wellness. Well, who controls the health and wellness industry in America today? Okay, Thursday. Let's use Thursday to represent banking and the economy. Who controls the economy in America today? All right, Friday. Let's use arts and culture for Friday. That's date night, right? Who controls arts and culture in America today? Saturday. That's the day we all recreate, right? We go to the beach, we go to the lake, we go camping. How many of you have been camping in a wilderness area lately? Who controls our recreation today? I have camped for 16 years in the high Uintas of the Utah wilderness. And just recently they've enacted this rule that you can't camp within a quarter mile of a body of water. In this place I've been camping for 16 years. How about Sunday? What does Sunday represent? Religion, right? Who controls religion in America today? You might be thinking your church. What is your church today in America? It's a 501c3 organization designated under the IRS code. Monday. What is Monday? Monday's education. This is a tough one. Who runs education in America today? Where are we sending our kids 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, to the very government that is incarcerating these men and women, killing them, and taking our land? And we wonder why our kids are growing up having a hard time understanding liberty. Now that's something I'm going to let you think on, and I'm not going to talk too much more about it because it tends to create a little controversy. And I don't like to be too controversial. But think about that. Because if you want a change, you better start thinking about who's educating your kids. Now, we've worked on behalf of Jeanette recently to try and help her with her situation with the BLM, because after her husband was killed and after the men who joined with him at the Malheur Refuge, sorry, Ken, if you're here, the Harney County Resource Center. After all that, the BLM still decided to refuse a widow her permit. And to this day, in spite of Arizona state law and federal law, which acknowledges she has a right to continue to use that permit, they have continued to deny her her right to graze. Now that's a serious problem. And it goes back to the challenge of getting informed, getting educated, and getting organized. Because when you begin to think about those things, direct action, as I mentioned, is not enough. There must also be political action. There must also be legal action. And I know what you're thinking. The system is corrupt. Now I want to try and draw a distinction between a corrupt system or a corrupt person and a systemically corrupt system. Okay? And our justice system can be looked at a little bit as systemically corrupt. But guess what? Thank goodness for that Oregon jury, because it found those men in that first trial not guilty. Now, that's right, Shauna. And Shauna. Love you, Shauna. I sat right in front of Shauna every day. And every time I turned around, she was smiling. So you women know things we don't, that's for sure. In spite of everything, and just to give you an idea, the judge in the Oregon case refused to let Ryan Bundy read the Constitution in court. One day, this is not a joke, one day he tried to read Scripture, and she said, there will be no reading of Scripture in my courtroom. And I couldn't help but think of like the Dark Ages when only the priests could read the Bible, right? All you lay people, stop trying to read that Constitution. And that's what it felt like. But I want you to realize something. The Oregon case had a lot of lawyering that went on. And as much as we hate lawyers, I know they're fun to joke about, it was a lot of work. Marcus Mumford, who was first chair in the trial, was up just like me and Rick pretty much every night till about 4 a.m. He'd then wake up and he'd be at the courthouse by 8, ready to go to trial every day for 2 months. Matt Schindler, who was an incredible attorney out of Oregon, worked incredibly hard. Bob Salisbury, Lisa Maxfield, all of them, Tiffany Harris, Shauna Cox, who represented herself, Ryan Bundy, who represented himself. The hours that went into the legal work to make that happen was significant. And if you think for one moment that we can just drop the ball on all of the political and legal organizing that needs to happen, you're in for some sad results in the future, because we have to get behind every single one of those efforts, just like the other side of the fence has done. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate Jeanette Finicum's willingness to do that. She has been willing to carry on the legacy of her husband, not just through events like this, but she's also fighting the BLM legally. Now, I need to end because Kris Ann Hall's a better speaker than I am, and she should be up here. And so should the Finicum family, because I know that's who you really want to hear from. Let me give you one more challenge. How many of you remember what Senator Wyden said? Yeah. They needed to stop the virus from spreading. And that was said prior to them coming here to to John Day, Oregon. Not only that, but Governor Brown had an assistant within her office, and they did an information dump after the death of LaVoy. And in that, we found emails from her staff saying that they should stop them at the exact place that they did. That was Governor Brown's office. Because they wanted to stop the virus from spreading. Now, what she doesn't realize is you're not the virus. You're the cure. And you have an obligation. You have an obligation. The cure was meant to come here 1 year ago. And you need to take it everywhere from here. That is your obligation. To spread the cure, which is liberty, right? An individual liberty at that, to the rest of this county, until those people who made that comment and forced that stop no longer hold office in this state. And thank goodness for that Oregon jury. Let's make it so that every jury is filled with jurors like that. You are the cure. Spread it far and wide, and you're going to have to organize. Get informed, get educated, and get organized.
Well, I guess I'm the one. Maggie, could I have you come and help me, please? Dad said it's okay. I guess I'm the one that has to eat my words. We found two good attorneys. Thank you, Morgan MPhilpot. I appreciate it. We found the cure. It's right here. We have, if you have a ticket, you might want to grab it. Because you could be wearing, I got my own Vanna White. What do you think of that? Forget that. Forget Vanna White. I got Terratini. You don't need Vanna White. Oh, now what'd you do? You pulled two? Disqualified. All right. 363526. Come on down and get your cap. All right. No, she's drawing. What's next? A book. 363499. 363499. Oh, here she comes. All right. What are we doing? Blue tarp. Signed by all people participating in this evening's activities. 363157. 363157. You don't have to go kicking no doors down, no gates open. Just come get your blue tarp. I'll be sitting right here by it. Anybody? Blue tarp going once? Twice? All right, Maggie. You know what? We should just auction this puppy off.
No kidding.
No, we bought raffle tickets. 363484.
We have a winner!
Woo! All right, thank you. Another book. Three 3250. 3250 for your book. Anybody? Throw your hand up. One more time. 3250. 363250. 363538. 3538. There we go. Excellent. Framed picture of LaVoy Finicum. 3673. 363673. Really? We got one right there. Oh, look at there. She's excited now. Another framed picture of LaVoy on the range. Last four numbers, 3475. That's the kind of excitement I expect to see right there. That's an A for the day. Another blue tarp. Last four numbers, 3269. 3269. 3269. Just dawned on me, I got a ticket in my pocket. Nope, not yet. $3729. Right here, we got a winner. All right, one picture left.
Sure. This picture is special. This is a tradition in the Finicum family to have all of the children and the parents on a horse for a family portrait. LaVoy's oldest sister, Sherry, was the mastermind behind this picture because she not only had to keep all these children looking in the same direction, but she had to have all the horses' ears and attention as well. And so this is our family portrait, Finicum style, on horseback. Last item up for drop.
And the jubilation will be coming from the person that has 3261. All right. Thank you, one and all. Pick up my mess. I think that's all the housekeeping for now. Gentlemen, we, as ranchers, business owners, fathers, whatever the case may be, like to talk about the cowboy way and the things that we do. But the truth of the matter is, rural America would not be what it is without the pillars of every family from coast to coast, including my family with my mother and my wife's mother. It is the women of the farm and ranch families that have made us the great nation in the world when it comes to remaining rooted in what's important. And I know of no better poster child for all of that than the role model I'm about to bring up to here, Jeanette Finicum. Please give her your appreciation.
Thank you so much for coming and honoring our family. You know, this past year has been a very difficult one for all of us. But because of the love and support that we have felt from all of you, we have been able to endure. And I have to thank you so very much for all that you have done for us in all the various ways that you have. I would like to take a moment just to say how much I am grateful for my Heavenly Father who loves me, who knows me individually. I'm grateful for my Savior, Jesus Christ, He has carried me this entire year. He has comforted me, and he has buoyed me up and carried me when I needed it. I am grateful for my faith in God. I'm grateful for my faith in my Savior. I'm grateful for the plan of salvation, for the plan of happiness in our faith that we call it. Because it tells me, it reminds me that I will see and be with my husband again for all time and for all eternity. And because I know that, I have peace. Because I know that, I can be happy. Because I know that, I can keep moving. I want to take a moment to also thank my family. For my in-laws who surprised me coming tonight. It is because of who they are that I was lucky enough to get the best man ever on this earth, LaVoy. I'm grateful for my brother-in-laws, Jody and Guy, who have helped pick us up off the ground this last year, and who have been surrogate dads and grandpas to my family. I'm grateful to my kids. By your fruits you shall know them. And if you have the pleasure of meeting my 12 children, you will know my husband, LaVoy, because that was what he dedicated his life to, was his family, to teaching and raising each one of them. And even after most were married and moved on, he devoted his time to them whenever they needed him. Down the mic. Can you hear me back there? I have to get it closer. Okay. I have watched my children step up to the plate. I've watched them in their own way, and each of them have special talents, and they've been able to go and share it with you all across the country. You know, there's that, I often say that they silenced one man's voice, but in doing so, they created 13 more very loud voices. I want to say thank you to John Day. You guys are amazing. I have had the pleasure, my kids and I have had the pleasure to meet with Elaine and her husband and the committee that has helped us put this together. Please give them a round of applause. Dave and Tad and all of the other members of that committee, thank you so much. I want to do a special thank you. And this person doesn't know I'm going to do this. but this young boy has followed our family all year. He got a cow and he raised it and he showed it and he won prizes. Riley, are you out there? Riley, do you want to come up? This little boy is the sweetest little boy. Come on up, Riley. He came to my hotel room and his mom and him made me a blanket. He picked out some beautiful little things. He's been sending me things all year long. He sends me little notes and pictures of all the things that he's doing in school. The cow that he raised, you called it LaVoy, right? Yeah. He was in the newspaper for raising this cow. And then he brought me a picture this time with him and that LaVoy cow. And so I have a picture for him of LaVoy with the first cow that he branded. And I wanted you to have that. Woo! Thank you, Riley.
I do this for you, young man.
That's our hope. Right there, that's our hope.
That's what we do.
I also wanted to give a great big huge shout out to all of our speakers tonight, and don't forget we still have Kris Hall. So thank you to Morgan and to Bill and to Garrett and to Kate and to Kris. And I know I have forgotten somebody. Yes, and Trent. Hasn't he been great? These are truly great patriots, educators, lovers of liberty. They're taking the time out of their day, out of their week, out of their year, touring around, speaking and teaching and educating all of us on the principles of liberty. That is what is important, and I am so grateful that they honored us by coming here today and sharing their talents with us. Thank you so much. I would like to talk about the wonderful outcome of the trial, about Oregon's Federal District Court jury finding all the defendants in the first trial not guilty of all charges. Our family is truly grateful that some of them have been able to return home to their families, and we are praying for all of those who are still incarcerated unjustly for their immediate release. And we hope for the same outcome for the next 7 that are still on trial and for those in Nevada. The courts here in Oregon first tried those who they considered were the leaders. LaVoy being the media spokesman for the group. If his right to life, due process, and a fair trial would not have been taken from him, he too would have been tried in a group of leaders, and he too would have been able to return home, acquitted of all charges, return home a free man. Woo! LaVoy's inalienable right to life was robbed from him merely for doing that which our nation's rule of law safeguards for its citizens, which is the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. He was not afforded due process. That is unacceptable. I have a statement that I'm going to read, and it's in reference to our wrongful death suit. Lawyers for the family have filed a notice of administrative claim with the United States government as a precursor to filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. This procedural requirement of first giving the FBI notice of our intent to sue them has caused a short delay in the actual filing of one collective lawsuit. While we could have filed our wrongful death lawsuit against the state of Oregon, it is more efficient to wait a short while longer to include the FBI in one lawsuit with all parties. As soon as the U.S. government denies our notice of administrative claim, which they customarily do, we will proceed with the filing of a single federal lawsuit combining all of the parties involved. I hope that this statement that my lawyers have prepared and Morgan's update about the BLM issue helps to answer some of the questions that you may have for our family in this process. It is a long road, but it is the road that we, our family, is prepared to make. We will continue, and we thank you for the support that you offer us in that journey. This is awkward holding these mics right here. I hope that you guys can still hear me. I wanted to talk a little bit about who my husband was, and most of you have gotten to know him through the videos, or you knew him in person. He was a man of God. He was a man who loved his God. He honored him in every way. He was a man who loved his family. He loved his life, and he lived every day to its fullest. He loved to play and to tease. He loved to work hard. He spent years loving and teaching disadvantaged young teenage boys. He loved his neighbor, and he gave freely of what he had. I watched him do that hundreds of times. He had a dream to own a ranch, and he realized it. He loved his cows. He was strong and courageous. He was principled. He was trustworthy. He was my friend. He loved his freedom, his agency, which was given to him by God. He loved living in America, and he knew he was blessed to be here. He loved this country, and he stood for liberty when he was called. He stood when he was called. A lot of people ask, why did he come to Oregon? And I have a little clip, and I would like LaVoy to answer that for you.
Following what's happening over in Bend, Oregon with that ranching family over there, Hammond family, and I'm pretty upset with what the BLM has done to them. Actually, I'm really angry. They had a prescribed burn that was allowed, got off onto 100 acres, burned 100 acres of BLM. Just rangeland, 100 acres. They'll come back just as green next year as ever. They threw them in jail. They fined tremendous amount of fines. And now it looks like they're facing 5 more years in prison. These are real lives. These are real people. By dang, I'm angry about it. America, how long are we going to put up with this type of stuff? It's time to stop. Here in this area, BLM's good to the ranchers here. They don't have a problem here out on the strip. Some good, decent people there. But the question is, then, are they doing good? The question is, should they have the power to do good? If they've got the power to do good, they got the power to do bad. If they got the power to help, they have the power to destroy. They shouldn't have the power, period. Because look what they're doing over to that family, the Hammond family. It's outrageous. And I'm pretty dang angry about it. I'd like to use a lot stronger language, but my daughters and my wife will probably watch this, and my mom, and so I'll refrain.
He wasn't a cussing man. Pretty dang mad. I remember the day he came home after making that video and he showed it to me and asked me to upload it. I said, that's what you're going to title it? I'm dang mad? If they have the power to do good, they have the power to do bad, they shouldn't have the power to begin with. Amen. Woo.
My eyes started to kind of glaze over a little bit. Maybe I can bring it down to a little more emotional level or a human level. Each one of you here today are important. Individually, each one of you are important. Not collectively, we're talking about you as an individual, as a human being. The Hammond family are human beings. They're individuals. They have loved ones. They have children, grandchildren. This is real. This affects real lives. And so that's why we're here today. And if our federal government would have abided by the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we would have never have gotten here. And so let me just kind of come to a simple level of why this is so bad at the federal level. Our founding fathers had escaped from tyranny. They believed in freedom. And so when they set up our government, they separated the powers, didn't they? And we all know what they are: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We know those 3 branches of power. Well, what has happened to 1/3 of our land mass? You know the federal government owns and controls 1/3 of this nation. Let me put that in perspective. You need to put in the country of Germany, and put in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and better throw in Great Britain too. And then you're getting about the same land mass as what the federal government says that they own and control. And they say they have complete legislative power whatsoever. They have taken it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has upheld it. Yes, they have complete power whatsoever over 1/3 of this nation. Now, let me explain it simply as I can, as I try to stumble over my words here, is that for myself as a rancher, my ranch is in northern Arizona, a bureaucrat behind the desk can write a statute regarding me, my ranch. It has the force and effect of law. This bureaucrat is not accountable to me. We have not elected him there. Now, if I get contrary to that statute, there's a federal ranger with a gun that can enforce that. And if it goes from there, I am brought into a federal court. Neither the law enforcement, the federal ranger, has been elected by us, the people here. They are not under the power of the recall. Neither the bureaucrat that wrote the statute, neither the law enforcement that enforces it, and now I am hauled into a federal court. all three branches of power under one head with no representation. Did we not, as Americans, face this issue some 200 years ago? Don't we remember that phrase? Taxation without representation. So now here we are, control without representation. 1/3 of our land mass. It's an empire within our own country. Unaccountable, unelected. The real power is in the bureaucracy. And so that's kind of the simple part of it. It's about family. It's about my family. It's about the Hammond family. I've spoken to many ranchers in Utah, in Nevada, in Arizona. They are all feeling the same thing. They're all feeling this oppression that is coming down upon them. Their livelihood is threatened, being taken away. Their ranches are being regulated out of business. And so this is real. These families are real. They're not trying to cause problems. They're food producers. They help make our country self-reliant, free, independent. Do you realize that you have to go back to about 1955 to get as low as the motherhead count as we have right now in the United States? Have any of you ate a steak lately? Do you know the price of that? That goes way up. If we had more demand, if we had more production, we would ship out more, we would feed more, we would be self-reliant as a country. These are good people. They produce, they add to our country. They do not take it away. I want to say one more thing about here, what we're doing. Every one of you that says this is an occupation until their demands are met, you misunderstand. We're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're here to work. These buildings here belong to Harney County. These are Harney County public lands, the state of Oregon. This is theirs. This is their land. This is their state. It's theirs. And so we've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work. We're going to try to help restore these ranchers that have lost their ranches back to them. We're going to legally go to the records. We're going to search out these ranchers. Over 100 ranchers have lost their ranches here in this very area, in this very county, have been pushed off. We would like to see them return to their ranches, ranch again, log again, live again as free people. And so we're here to try to help that happen. We're going to go to work. We're not going to just sit down here and twiddle our thumbs. We've got a lot to do, and I appreciate you being here. I'm just a simple hick, and doing the best I can. And I love this country. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my family. And if we lose freedom, what shall they do? I want my children to experience real freedom. Breathe free air. And thank you.
Who are the real terrorists? Those men at Malheur were peacefully demonstrating and exercising their First Amendment right to speak and peacefully assemble and demonstrate. They weren't tearing up, burning down, damaging property. They were not hurting anyone physically. They were not threatening. George Bernard Shaw's definition of socialism or collective control is, quote, Socialism, reduced to its simplest legal and practical expression, means the complete discarding of the institution of private property by transforming it into public property and the division of the resultant income equally and indiscriminately among the entire population. Isn't that what we are watching here today in America? Are we not living witnesses to this taking place right here in the West? They are transforming our private property into public property. Are we a socialist country? We are becoming one. We must continue to stand. We must continue to fight against the theft of this property in this nation. We must stand. I love what President Trump said in his inaugural speech. He said, quote, "What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people." January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. End quote. It gives me hope. Doesn't that give you hope? Securing the rights and freedoms of the individual citizen is the most important function of the government, not securing more government. A French political economist, Frédéric Basset, said, "Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it is the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused man to make laws in the first place." Thomas Jefferson asked, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are a gift of God?" Have we forgotten that? Rights are either God-given as part of the divine plan, or they are granted by government as part of a political plan. And so I ask, which is it? One of LaVoy's favorite people, President Ezra Taft Benson, said, quote, "The fight for freedom is God's fight. When a man stands for freedom, he stands with God. As long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. And were he to stand alone, he would still stand with God. I testify that the God of heaven sent some of his choicest spirits to lay the foundation of this government, and he has sent other choice spirits, even you who read or hear my words today, to preserve it." End quote. God is the true author of liberty. God has given us our agency. God has provided this freedom here on this earth. We as a people need to remember that. We need to go back to our roots and recognize who the true author of liberty is. Are we willing? Are we able? Are we ready to help restore and preserve this God-given land and what God has given us? Many have asked, what can I do to help? There is so much to be done everywhere, right? But are we willing? Are we ready? I wasn't. wasn't ready. When LaVoy was murdered, I was not ready to make this stand. I wasn't ready to be standing here. I had not prepared for what I am doing now. But I am now. It's not too late. I may not retain everything as well as I could if I was young. But it's not too late. It's not too late to stand and let our voices be heard for true and honest principles. We must have the courage to stand. We must stand. We must stand even if it's difficult, even if we're accused of being politically incorrect. Press forward. Ignore that garbage. Press forward. I remember one of the last things that LaVoy said to me as I got in the car to leave. He said to me, Jeanette, have faith. Take courage. God is in charge. Well, I have faith. And I have courage. And I know that God is in charge. And that has brought such peace. It's given me strength to get through this year and to be out doing this. I know that he is with me. I know that LaVoy is here with me. There's a poem that's titled, I'm Only One. I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. What I can do that I ought to do, and what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I shall do. I like that. I know that each of you can also get involved in your own sphere, in your own community, whether it's a school board or a city council, in your church, doing charity work. There is much to be done everywhere. And we are all different and diverse. We all have unique talents that God has given us to share. And so I encourage you, I implore you to get involved in this process of having our liberties restored. Our family, months ago, got together to create a family mission statement. You know, things were coming at us so fast. We didn't want to get sidetracked with what we wanted to accomplish as a family. And so we took the time to sit down as a collective group and decide where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do. And our mission statement reads as follows. We, the Finicum family, seek to better understand, maintain, and defend our God-given rights to further our eternal happiness, will virtually let our voices be heard, educating on the principles of the Constitution, and our testimonies be seen for personal property rights, liberty and freedom, and one that has become ever more dear to us, the importance of life. It has helped us to have this, to stay focused, so that all that's coming at us doesn't distract us, and we can keep pressing forward with what I know was my husband's vision and dream, was to continue to teach. That's how he wanted to affect change, by taking what he had learned and going out and sharing it with others.
night is far spent. The Constitution has been shredded. That it lives in your heart. You know what freedom is and what freedom isn't. Stand. Because when you stand, others will stand with you. And God can't stand with you if you don't stand. Once you stand, you can expect the hand of providence to be over you. Don't matter how it ends, it matters how you stand. This is LaVoy Finicum. One Cowboy stands for freedom. See you later.
I'm so glad to see you all standing. So, continue to stand. Continue to be involved. Continue to do the work. Because we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. One man can make a difference. He did make a difference. Difference because he was standing for God. He didn't have his priorities mixed up. He knew what he was doing and who he was doing it for. He was not doing it for fortune and fame. I want to introduce you to my family next because they are our life's work. They are what I'm most proud of outside of my husband. I know he's very proud of them and all that they've been doing to stand for liberty and to stand for this Constitution, and to stand with God doing it. So, Charity, can you help with that? First is our oldest daughter, Tara Tenney, and her son, Tommy and Morgan. And the next picture is a picture of I'm sorry. Tara is married with 2 other children. That's why there were 4 boys in that first picture and a husband. The second picture is of our next daughter, Tiara Bell Collier, and she is not here because she just had that darling little baby there. She's about a week and a half old. Our next child is Robert Cantel Finicum and his wife Haley and his daughter Clara, and our newest little guy here, Elijah LaVoy. Our next daughter is Najoni Tawny Hawk Crane. How do you love that name? Isn't that a wonderful name? Najoni Tawny Hawk. And she's married with 4 little kids. Here's her newest one, Sophia Jeanette. Isn't that sweet? Ariana Marie Brown is next. She's married to Kevin with 3 little boys, and this is her latest little boy. Yes, I'm sorry, Zane LaVoy. This is a test for Grandma, right? I'm supposed to remember all the names. Okay, I know. Our next daughter is Brittany Marie Beck, and her husband Levi is here. He's manning the booth back there. Wonderful man. And little Peyton in the picture, and our little granddaughter Liberty. Isn't that fitting? Our next child is Mitch, and thank you, Brittany. Mitch. He's such a wonderful boy. I am so grateful to have him in our family. He is serving in Colorado for the Army, so that is why he's not here today. Our next son is Thomas Charles Kenny and his wife Deidre and his 2 little boys. Shalise Finicum Finch with all 4 of her little kids there and her husband Spencer. I don't know if you can still see him. Come on over. And then James Scott Finicum. He is another wonderful young man that we have in our family. And our next daughter, Danielle Finicum. There you are. This is Danielle. I'm so glad that you did appear because sometimes she's our quiet one and we would always leave her because she was so quiet. Oh my goodness, and we would feel so bad. And our caboose, our glue, we call her because she belongs to everybody, Tian Finicum. This is our family. And from our family to you, we want to say that we love you and we thank you for coming. And, oh, yes, thank you. I have so many helpful children, because they know me. They know I get nervous and forget things. This is why my husband stood. I have 25 grandchildren. We don't have them all here, but we have 25. Our America needs to be fixed for them, right? I see a lot of grandparents here. We have one last video. Wasn't that beautiful? Again, thank you for coming, and we have the best for last. Can I say that about you, Kris? I'm going to turn the mic over to Trent.
Once again, the Finicum family, ladies and gentlemen, please give your appreciation. Just as a quick follow-up, as Kris Ann's making her way up here, LaVoy spoke of not just the livelihoods, but what it is that the ranchers do every day. If the federally owned land with the rights by the federal lands grazers was utilized properly, the cattle would produce 110 million protein meals annually in the United States. It's currently, at my estimation, about 20% of that because it's not being managed properly. That's what LaVoy was speaking about. That puts it in numbers. And I think we need to, and by the way, when you manage the land properly, you don't burn up 54 homes in Grant County because you have a fire that the government can't control or chose not to. With that, there was one. Kris Ann Hall probably needs no introduction whatsoever to this audience. She's a fireball. And if you're not fired up now, get ready. because this is what happens when somebody actually starts life as a liberal socialist and sees the light. She's on a mission, folks, and she's got you now in her sights. Kris Ann Hall.
Thank you. All right. Technical difficulties, maybe? Hit play and it'll go? Did it come up? Nope. Oh, where's my... Where are you? All right, can you see that now? Okay. JC. Display settings. Yeah. Everybody give my husband a hand. He is awesome. No, yeah, that's the wrong one. That's the one down there. Here. It's up there now. Thank you. All right. Okay, so when Jeanette asked me to come here today, and I found out that she wanted me to actually teach a class, I want to tell you I really didn't know if I didn't feel like that was appropriate. I felt like this is a time where we're supposed to honor LaVoy and we're supposed to sort of invigorate everybody and get them excited about what the future is to hold, and everybody should be motivated to get out there and stand, right? And I kept thinking, wow, standing up and teaching a class, that's going to be like a major buzzkill. And I kept thinking, you know what? I don't know any better way to portray who LaVoy was than to teach a class. So I'm what I call an original text historian. What I teach you comes not from my opinion or from my interpretation, but from the history and the facts itself. And so I want to present to you why I'm here today from the original source. And you can't hear that, can you? Of course, because... And you know, we did pray over this, so I don't even understand. I mean, I'm at 100% here. It's all the way. It's coming out. Oh, you got to turn it up over there then, I guess. Is that all the way up? All right, here's what we're going to do. Sorry, I am really sorry about this. This is why I hate using videos. Just put the mic up to the speaker. You're going to try again? We actually tested this out, so there's no reason why this shouldn't be working. I have it all the way up on all platforms. Yeah, no, I got that too. So right here, it's all the way up. Now I'm going to be sick. right, so here we're just going to go.
Chris, we have an IT tech from Oklahoma here.
All right, whatever.
Robert Dial.
Maybe she can... He? Okay. Hold on a second. I'm going to try one more thing and then we're going to quit. So, because I'm running out of time here. Give me this. No, it's too late for that. We're not going through all of this. This is. How many of you believe that the devil owns the power? Is the prince of the power of the air? Okay. So now we have selected. You see, I have selected the headphones section. So you're going to have to turn that up over there, I think.
You're on my ranch. Beautiful out there. It's time that we do something more than just talk about freedom, about freedom. So I want to educate you. Help we stand for freedom. This is very important.
So you're going to have to listen real close. Because this is apparently as good as it's going to get. Oops. Here we go. No, I don't want that. Now it's bad again. All right. So basically what we have here is a video of LaVoy explaining why he does what he does. You can see why he does what he does because he wanted to educate. And that's what I wanted to sort of bring to you today, was the fact that we are here because LaVoy wanted to educate. I believe that that's why LaVoy was seen as a threat from the beginning. Because he was a very powerful educator. I'm up there, right, Deb? All right. And so I don't know of any better way to bring this class, or no, any better reason to bring this class than because I believe that if LaVoy was here today, he would be teaching about the Constitution. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through this class because how many of you want to stand? As I travel, the most asked question that I get is, what do we do? How many of you like to know what to do? See, I think what causes people to hesitate to stand a lot of times is this lack of foundation, this lack of understanding of what needs to happen. What do I do? How do I stand? What is it that I need to do to play my part? You see, for so many years, so many decades and so many generations, we have been taught that it's just, the Constitution is just too complicated. You can't possibly know what it means. Come on, now that's why we have the Supreme Court. Because obviously we have these intellectually advanced people who get to wear black robes and tell us what everything in life means. It's too complicated for you. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And after generations and generations and generations of being taught like that, we get to a position where we don't know what we should be doing because we don't understand what needs to be done, and we don't understand how we're supposed to be operating anymore. America has become so federal-centric that even in our conservative circles, in our conservative politics, we have people who do nothing but run to the federal government to fix their problems. But that's not who we are. In spite of what the CIA had been publishing for many years until we actually exposed it a couple of months ago, we are not a federal presidential republic. How many of you saw that? The FBI had on their fact book page that America was a federal presidential republic. But I think that's just an indication of how we've become to think in America. Remember, it's the conservatives that went to the federal government to define marriage. It was the conservatives who invited government in the marriage first, not the liberals or the progressives or anybody. It was the conservatives. We ran to the federal government and say, define this for us, when they had no authority to do that. But what we forgot, because we don't teach the proper history anymore, we don't teach who we are anymore, we forgot that the power given to one administration remains in the next. And you never know in the next one if they're going to believe what you believe now. Not only that, power does not remain stagnant within government. It always grows exponentially. So we asked an administration to define marriage for us because we saw the administration believed in the conservative Christian way, and they're going to define marriage the way we want them to. But we forgot that that power would remain into the next administration. And the next administration, they had the power to define marriage. And then how did that work out for us? But then not only that, forgetting that power expands exponentially always in government, we asked the government to define marriage. Now they're not just defining marriages, they're defining bathrooms, they're defining wedding cakes, they're defining photography. You see, that's why we were created as a constitutional republic. So that the people would know the boundaries of government. See, the Constitution wasn't just a limitation on the government. It was to be a reminder to the people of the barriers of government, so we didn't invite them out. Because when you invite the lion out of the cage, don't be surprised when it bites your head off. In one of the clips that I had made in this video, LaVoy says, I'm not anti-government. They keep me calling me anti-government. I am not anti-government. Can I just tell you I stand with LaVoy on that? In spite of being on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list 2 years in a row as an anti-government extremist group, I am not anti-government. I am anti-lawless government. But if we're going to get government back into its limited and defined box as it was created, then we, the people, must understand those barriers. We, the people, must understand the checks and balances. So do you think the federal government is out of control? So what needs to happen? We need to wake up. Nothing needs to happen except that America have a revolution of the mind. We need to remember how we were created, where we came from, who we're supposed to be, who the federal government is supposed to be. What is the check? What is the greatest check and balance between the federal government's power? Our framers taught us. What I find most interesting is even in the legal fields, because I know I've had several legal colleagues up here teaching today. I can tell you they'll probably amen me on this one, but we don't teach the Constitution in law school anymore. We don't. We teach constitutional law, which teaches our law students, who will be our future judges and lawyers, that they know more about the Constitution than the men who wrote it. Because after all, we have cell phones and computers, so we're intellectually or technologically advanced, so we must be intellectually superior. So we have to go back and tell the founders what they meant when they wrote the Constitution, because after all, they were too stupid to know for themselves. I've even had colleagues tell me, and scholars say, it's impossible to know what the founders meant when they wrote the Constitution. What? Really? Those people wrote reams and reams and reams about what they did and why they did it. My goodness, the University of Chicago has a resource called the Founders Constitution, where they go through the Constitution, article, section, and clause, and link to the documents that the founders wrote about those sections. How can we claim we can't know what they meant when it's right there, even in the University of Chicago? But we got to get rid of this idea that we can't know. I mean, not just them, us. Our Constitution was written in such a way that everybody was supposed to be able to understand it. The common man on the street in 1789 who had no cell phone, who had no laptop computer, could pick up the Constitution, know what it meant, and knew how government was supposed to be applied. How can we walk around with this superiority complex and yet still spout the fact that we can't know when the guy walking down the street in 1789 knew it all? We got to train ourselves to start asking the right questions. We got to get back to basics because we have failed to teach the right things for a very, very long time. We have failed to become an educated people. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. But on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." If we're going to fix this, there's a couple things we need to do. We need to first understand that Donald Trump is not going to save America. Okay, that should have been a really loud applause out there. We need to understand that the office of the president is a very limited office in power, and the power to run America does not rest in the executive branch. Woo! Donald Trump was not elected to be king. He was not elected to be Messiah. He was elected to be the President of the United States, and he is limited in his capacity by the delegation of power through the Constitution. And saving America is not in Article 2. We need to understand that although we've been in the habit over the last 8 years of pointing fingers at the President of the United States, 99.9% of the problems in America did not come from Obama. They came from our conservative Republican House of Representatives. It was Congress that kept funding all of these things. It was Congress that made all these laws. And it is Congress that stood by and did nothing when Anna Brown in her courtroom said, "You can't read the Constitution here." Because it is still today the constitutional authority for Congress to impeach judges for bad behavior. And I think if you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution and then deny it, that is the very definition of bad behavior. We got to understand that the judiciary was established to be the least power in federal government, not the greatest. The Constitution does not delegate to the Supreme Court the authority to be the ultimate arbiters of what is constitutional and what is not. That is a power they invented and created on their own and bestowed upon themselves. Judges don't make law, they issue opinions. by the authority delegated to them by the Constitution. We've got to stop looking at them as if they are an oligarchy of kings and queens. Because we threw off kings a whole long time ago. Now, if we're going to get to these conclusions, if we're going to get to these solid understandings, these understandings that are not just my opinion, based in history, based in text, based in the words of those who created the Constitution themselves, then we've got to start over. We've got to start building a proper foundation so we know, so we can have that boldness. Do you know why LaVoy had that boldness? Because he knew how it was supposed to work. And nobody could rattle him because he was on a firm foundation. I want every single person in this room, in the few minutes that I have with you this evening, to get a feeling of that firm foundation. A feeling that will give you that boldness, because if we're going to leave here different than we came in, we have to know what we need to do, and we have to be confident in that. It's not just enough to sit here. It's not just enough to come and show your support. It is only enough when you stand. Now, I am not here to teach you my opinions. I am not here to teach you my interpretations. I have reporters and people who ask me that all the time. What do you think about this? My thoughts are irrelevant. I will tell you that again. I don't want you to believe a single word that I'm about to tell you here today. I want you to go home and find out these facts on your own. I want you to research these things. I want you to become the expert too. Because I am confident that what I am giving you is fact and history and cannot be disputed, because that's who we are. I'm not here to teach you. I am here to facilitate the lessons that our framers put into writing for you. Do we need to ask the Supreme Court, or do we need to ask the people who actually wrote the document? So the first thing we need to understand is this proper placement of power. If we're going to fix what's wrong, we all agree that the federal government is out of control. If we're going to fix that, then we have to understand what is our greatest guard of our liberty. Because that was the single thing that the founders of our constitutional republic were concerned with securing. Just one thing. They had different ideas on how to achieve that, but they had one goal. The preamble tells us that. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. One thing, securing liberty. What is our greatest guard in securing our liberty? Well, how about we ask the legislators of the state of Virginia in 1799? These would be the people who were in the delegation that wrote the Constitution, that debated, that voted in for Virginia to become part of the constitutional republic. They knew how it was supposed to work because they were there when it was being drafted and they were part of the ratification. And they're about to tell us our greatest guard. Your greatest guard of your liberty is not the Supreme Court, it is not Donald Trump, and it is not your congressman. The greatest guard of your liberty is your state and local government. And that's how it's supposed to work. But again, you don't have to take my word for it. Look at these legislators. See, in 1799, I don't know if this is really hard to believe, but in 1799, we already have a federal government that's trying to come out of its limited and defined box, and we have the states who are trying to push it back in. And these legislators in Virginia are begging the people, please help us do our job. Because the number one duty of your state and local government, the number one obligation of your state and local government is not economic improvement. It is not education. It is not resource management. It is not business regulation. The number one obligation of your state and local government is to guard the sovereignty of the state. It's the only way you can defend the Constitution. Because if your state is sovereign, you have prosperity. You have peace. You manage your resources. You have everything that you need in your own disposal if you are sovereign. Look at this. It would be deceitful. We are unwilling to shrink from our representative responsibilities, and it would be deceitful in us who have been entrusted with guarding the sovereignty of the state. Why do they have to guard the sovereignty of the state? They tell us because we took that oath. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Before we leave here this evening, I hope that you will understand from their guidance that if your state is not sovereign, the Constitution is destroyed. There is no Constitution. There is no constitutional republic if Oregon is not sovereign. Now, what is the greatest threat on the sovereignty of your state? Federal encroachments. That's what they said. And we understand they're telling the people we've got to warn you of these federal encroachments, even though the federal government has become very artful at making you think you need to have them. This is 1799. They said, these encroachments may be clothed with the pretext of necessity. Because you know we must have national health care, right? Of course we must have national health care. If we don't have national health care, we're all going to die. You're laughing because you realize we're all going to die, right? Federal health care just allows the federal government to decide who, when, where, and how you die. But they said not only these encroachments be disguised by the pretext of necessity, they'll be clothed in the arguments of expediency, because you know you have to pass the bill so you can read the bill. Sound familiar, anybody out there? Okay, so can I remind you now that this was 1799 and not 2017? Why does it sound the same? Because human nature never changes. It's why Patrick Henry said, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that's the lamp of experience. I know no way to judge the future but by the past. Those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes, because history always repeats. And here we are doing the same thing. Because we have forgotten that the greatest threat to liberty, the greatest threat to the sovereignty of the state is federal encroachments. Every dollar that your state takes, any dollar, just $1 that your state and local government takes from the federal government, destroys your sovereignty. Because who pays the piper dictates the tune, right? Because $1, then all of a sudden you have people believing and legislators preaching we can't survive without the federal government. How about we realize that we survived a really long time before the federal government even existed? Can we at least recognize that one? And then to say that just simply because Joe the plumber, our next door neighbor, let's put it this way, John the rancher is irresponsible, can't manage his own land, but John the rancher is going to run for office, and he's going to go be a federal representative. Now all of a sudden, the same guy who couldn't manage his land, now that he's a federal representative, he is somehow magically transformed into something he wasn't before because he's now in office? Or maybe John the rancher now wears a federal BLM badge. Now all of a sudden, because he has a federal badge on his chest, he is now more qualified to manage his land than he was when he was just John the rancher. Does anybody realize how that doesn't even logically compute? Let's see about this thing. We're going to ask ourselves some really simple questions. Let me ask you this question. Which came first, the states or the federal government? I want to see if everybody agrees with that. Which came first, the states or the federal government? All right. Now see, if we actually believed that to be true, the federal government wouldn't be exercising the power over the states that they do, because by natural law and the laws of primacy, who comes first is in charge. So let's look at how much first the states were, because we don't teach that quite accurate anymore. We teach in our schools that our states became independent from Great Britain with the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. You know, those bunch of rogue, anarchist, elite, rich guys who wanted to throw off their government so that they could oppress the people of their choice. Only that's not true. Our states became independent of Great Britain on July 2nd, 1776, with the ratification of the Lee Resolution. The Lee Resolution, a three-step process to becoming free from Great Britain, was debated, voted, and ratified in the Continental Congress on July 2nd, 1776. Our separation from Great Britain was a matter of law. A legally binding congressional act that's just as legally binding as anything our Congress does today that's constitutional. So if we understand that our states existed on July 2nd, then we must admit that our states existed prior to what? Everything else. By the way, John Adams was so excited about July 2nd that on July 3rd that he wrote home to his wife Abigail and said, July 2nd will be an epic day where Americans will celebrate their independence forever. Do you know it wasn't until the mid-1800s that we started celebrating our independence on July 4th? So we must admit that our states existed prior to the Declaration of Independence by 2 days. Now let me ask you something. Is there a federal government on July 2nd? No, we just threw it off. Is there a federal government on July 4th? No. What are the only governments that exist on July 4th? The states. Our first federal government comes through the Articles of Confederation. They didn't work out so well, though. Not probably for the reasons that you were taught, however. Because one of the problems in our education system in America, same as our political system, is that we have become overrun by people that I call federal supremacists. These are these people that believe that the federal government is superior to the states in all cases. They may say that federal law always trumps state law. They may say that we must go to the Supreme Court for every problem and every dispute and every interpretation of the Constitution. Either way you slice it, that is a federal supremacy. They are in all branches of government. They are in all political parties, liberal, conservative, and midstream. And in our conservative groups, we have federal supremacists teaching that our Articles of Confederation failed because our founders created a federal government that was too small and didn't have enough power. That's what some of our conservative educational outlets are teaching. Do you know what that implies, right? That the Constitution that we have now created a bigger federal government with more power. Only that's not true. It is true that the Articles of Confederation had to be fixed. But it was because the federal government didn't have enough guidance to do what they were supposed to do. One of the biggest problems, the biggest problem that drove them to finally decide to create a new delegation, was a problem with treaties. The federal government was writing inequitable treaties. They were making treaties where one state or one set of states had to foot all the bill, and another state or another set of states got all the benefits. And the states who were required to foot the bill were like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not why we joined up in this union, to transfer our prosperity from one state to another. That's not what general welfare means. So we're not paying. Now here's the problem. A treaty is a contract with a foreign country that has no idea how we're supposed to work. So when we have states refusing to foot the bill, we're breaking a contract with a foreign country. Not only that, the the states who are supposed to get all the benefit are mad at the states who won't pay. So we're on the verge of war with foreign countries for broken contracts. We're on the verge of war between the states for inequitable treaties, and we just got started. So Congress says, we got to pull together a new delegation. We're going to amend these articles. But they don't amend them. They replace them with our new Constitution, which why our Constitution is called the more perfect union, because it was supposed to be more perfect than the other one. Now let me ask you this question as we're looking at this timeline. We agree there's no federal government on July 2nd, no federal government on July 4th. We have a federal government through the Articles of Confederation. But let me ask you this very important question. When we dissolve the Articles of Confederation to ratify our new Constitution, what happened to the federal government that was formed by the Articles of Confederation? I need to hear that a little bit louder out there. It's gone. So the period of time between the dissolving of the Articles of Confederation and the ratifying of the Constitution, what are the only governments that exist? The states. 13 years of states, living, breathing people, managing their land, taking care of their businesses, raising their children before we even have the federal government that we have today. Amazing, isn't it? So now let's discover, we know how long the states existed prior to the federal government. Let's discover once again, rediscover, what is a state? A state is defined and described by the Declaration of Independence as follows. This is the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, which, by the way, is taken from the first clause of the Lee Resolution, that legislative act that created our states. It says, "We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare." See, we didn't become independent on July 4th. We published and declared what we had done 2 days prior. That these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. Now, we have just learned what a state is not. A state is not a colony, right? Because if a state was synonymous with colony, then there'd be no point in making the distinction. So what's the difference between a colony and a state? Very simply, a colony is not free and independent. If you live in a colony, you must seek permission and guidance from the federal government before you can manage your land. You must seek permission and guidance from the federal government before you can use your resources. You must seek permission and guidance from the federal government before you can educate your people, make certain laws, regulate your businesses. Anybody feeling like they live in a colony? Well, here's the good news. You don't live in a colony. You live in a state that is free and independent. So we know we are not a colony, but what are we? Continuing with the Declaration of Independence, it tells us exactly what we are. It says, these free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the what? State of what? State of Great Britain. That word state is not simply synonymous with New Hampshire, Rhode Island, or Virginia. That word state is synonymous with Great Britain, France, and Germany. We created 13 independent, free, sovereign governments, just like France, Spain, or Great Britain. Now look, it gets even better because it tells us more specifically who we are. Because if we don't know who we are, how do we take a stand to defend what we should be? Right? So now we're continuing. That as free and independent states, they have, what do they have? Full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states like Great Britain, France, or Spain may of right do. Is there a federal government on July 4th? Who are the only governments that could be receiving this power? The states. This is who Oregon is today. This is the power you hold, present tense, because nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is this. Now, your federal supremacist friend, love him as you may try to tell you that doesn't apply to Oregon because Oregon wasn't part of the first 13. Only that's not historically accurate, legally accurate, or constitutionally accurate. There's a doctrine called the equal footing doctrine that says every state that enters the Union enters on the same footing as the first 13. And hey, Oregon, here's your footprint. And any other state that's represented here today. Somebody might try to tell you, well, that may be who Oregon was when you formed Oregon as a state. But when you entered into the Union, you surrendered your power. Really? No. The Constitution says the power's not delegated. How many does that sound familiar to? The 10th Amendment. The power's not delegated to the United States, are reserved to the states. Are the words delegate and surrender, are they synonymous? Are you sure? Well, now give yourselves a hand. You now know more than the Supreme Court of the United States. And probably your favorite law professor. I have read Supreme Court opinions written by Justice Antonin Scalia that said the states surrendered power. That is not true. It is not only constitutionally inaccurate, legally accurate, historically accurate, it's politically ridiculous. How many of you have heard of a sovereign government by the name of Germany? Okay, some of you haven't heard of Germany. All right, so we all agree. Didn't Germany join the European Union? So let's all buy plane tickets. We'll fly over to Germany. We'll have a big town hall meeting, and we'll explain to the German people and their chancellor that they are no longer a sovereign government because they joined the EU. How do you think the Germans are going to take that little bit of news? You're laughing because you know it's ridiculous, but here's the question. Why do the people of Oregon buy it then? Oregon and every other state in this union was created with greater sovereignty than Germany could ever imagine, because our states were created under the fundamental principle that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Germany was created under the principle that kings give rights and privileges. We were created with greater sovereignty, and yet we accept greater servitude. How does that happen? Because we have been teaching the wrong things for a very long time. The next step in our laying our foundation and building our building blocks is understanding. We know when the states and the federal government were formed. We know what a state actually is. Now we need to understand what is the Constitution. Legally speaking, the Constitution is a contract. It is a legally binding contract. But it's even better than that, because the founders, when they write about our Constitution, they don't call it a contract. They call it a compact, which is even better. It tells us even more specifically what the Constitution is, helps us understand how it's supposed to work. Because you see, a contract is a legally binding agreement between legally sovereign people. When I say legally sovereign, I mean they've achieved the age of legal status. Can your 15-year-old make a legally binding contract? No, because they're not legally sovereign in the eyes of the law. They're still subject to their parents. But the Constitution is not a contract because our framers call it a compact, which is even better. Because a compact is not an agreement between legally sovereign people. It is an agreement between legally sovereign governments. Let's go connect our dots. What were the only sovereign governments that existed prior to the creation of our Constitution? The states. That means if the Constitution, as our framers called it, is a compact, the agreement between legally sovereign governments, that means that our states are the creators of the compact. The states are the creators of our Constitution. They are, legally speaking, the parties to the contract. Now here's the funny thing. You will find people that will dispute this and tell you that the Constitution is an agreement between the people and the federal government. That is not true. As a matter of fact, if you have ever read anything that Patrick Henry said, you would know that that was one of his major contentions with the language of the Constitution. He said, this document says, we the people. What do you mean, we the people? We the people did not vote for this. The Constitution cannot be an agreement between the people and the federal government. And you can prove that with one simple fact. Let me ask you this question. Was the Constitution ratified by popular vote? No. How was the Constitution ratified? By the states. 3/4 of the states had to ratify for the Constitution to become a legally binding compact. Somebody might try to tell you that the Constitution is an agreement between the states and the federal government. Our federal supremacist friends are always trying to do that because they want to make the states and the federal government co-equal, because then it's just one step away from being superior. But to say that the Constitution is an agreement between the states and the federal government is a temporal impossibility. Think about this. The federal government did not exist until the Constitution was ratified. How many of you remember from your civics class that there was a very precarious moment when we didn't have enough states to ratify? Anybody remember being taught that? If we had not ratified the Constitution, what would have happened to the federal government? It wouldn't exist. The federal government is the product of the Constitution. You cannot be a party to the contract if you are the product of the contract. You cannot sign the contract into legal being if you do not exist until the contract is signed. Anybody see that? So after proper deduction, the only conclusion that remains is that the states are the creators of the Constitution. And since we know that the states are the creators of the Constitution, then we must admit that the states are the creators of the central government, right? But if we believe that, there'd be no way we could have a federal government to exercise power over us, because in natural law we know that it is abomination, it is against natural law for the creation to be superior to the creator. The states, in creating the federal government, enumerated its specific powers, created a limited and defined central government, and then they did the most important thing they could have ever done. They reserved all other powers to themselves. Now the question we must ask in our who, what, where, when, why laying foundation is, what power went where? We know that we delegated some power to the federal government. We know that we reserved some power to the states. So what went where? Is there power sort of floating around in the ether somewhere, waiting for somebody to claim it? Well, I got good news. You don't have to wait for the Supreme Court to come to a decision. The father of our Constitution, James Madison, already told us. This is a document Madison wrote we call Federalist 45. He says, the powers delegated. Now, this is a really important word. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and, look at that, defined. He doesn't say few and left to the interpretation of the Supreme Court. He doesn't say few and left to the creation of new congressional acts. He says few and defined. Those that remain in the states are numerous and indefinite. Now look at this. He says the former, the powers delegated to the federal government, will be exercised principally on external objects, and then he names them: war, peace, negotiation, foreign commerce. Let's go connect some dots. How many of you remember seeing those powers listed somewhere else just a minute ago? Somebody shout out where we saw that. In the Declaration Declaration of Independence, right? War, peace, negotiation, commerce, do all other acts and things. Who owns this power right here? Well, Madison says that this power was delegated to the federal government. So if this power belonged to the states first, who is delegating power to the federal government? The states. But if we believed that and had a dictionary, there is no way we could have the federal government operating the way it does. Look at the definition of the word delegate. A temporary trust of responsibility or authority from a higher power to a lower power. We've just all admitted that the states delegated power to the federal government. By the definition of the word delegate, that means the states are the higher power, and the federal government is the lower power. Isn't that amazing? It's not complicated. Well, what power remains in the states? The 10th Amendment says the powers not delegated to the United States are reserved to the states and to the people respectively. What powers are reserved to the states? Well, Madison, our father of our Constitution, tells us in the Federalist 45. He says the powers reserved, this is also a very important word, reserved, to the several states. Now that word several doesn't mean a few, so don't let them confuse you on that, meaning only 13. That word several is short for, is a term for severed, meaning separate and independent. And so he says, the powers reserved to the several states will extend to all. Oops, all. What's the word all mean? Just making sure. We haven't changed. I know we have a government that likes to redefine the meaning of the word is. Okay? I'm just checking that all still means all, right? So the powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which in the ordinary course of affairs concerns the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. What about the EPA, the FDA, and the BLM? That's Bureau of Land Management, by the way, not Black Lives Matter. Wouldn't that be the properties of the people? What about the Department of Education, the HHS, the USDA, the FDA? Wouldn't that be the lives of the people? What about the FBI, the DHS, the FCC, the SEC, the FAA, the ATF, the DOE, or whatever you want to call them, all these agencies today? Wouldn't that be the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the states? There you have it. Reserved to the states. There's nothing floating out in the ether. It has been specifically delegated, or it is reserved to the states. How did we get to this point? Because we decided that judges and politicians know more than we possibly know. Sometimes when they get elected, some great white dove lands on their head and departs Joe the plumber who needs to know about interpreting the Constitution. Because we forgot the meaning of the word reserved. Remember in 1799 we were having problems with the federal government. We're having problems with the federal government again in 1830. It's a period of history called the Great Debate of 1830. And Calhoun is going to help us understand the importance of the term reserved. He says the doctrine which denies the states the right of protecting their reserved powers. Now that is a very bold statement for Calhoun to step up and say, your states have a right to do anything. Because governments get power. People have rights. Why would the states have a right? Well, let's notice that it's a little r right, not a big R right, which big R right is an inalienable right, a natural law right. But their right to protect their reserved powers stems from the definition of that word, reserved. So let's look at this for a second. Let's pretend there's a chair up here, and on the chair is a sign that says, reserved to Kris Ann Hall. If someone else sits in that chair, what do I have the right to do? Kick them out. If that chair has a reserve sign on it and I don't have the right to kick somebody out, is the chair really reserved? No. And that's exactly what Calhoun is saying. He's saying, look, if the states do not have the right to protect what we reserve to them, then what you must admit is that it is the federal government now with the right to determine solely, exclusively, and finally the limits of its own power. Because all the federal government has to do is say, hey, we're going to do education today and you just got to like it. We're going to manage your land and you just got to like it. If they don't have the right to protect what's been reserved to them, are they sovereign? They're just colonies. Now let's go back and connect a dot, a really, really important dot. What kind of document is the Constitution? It's a compact. A compact is an agreement between what? Sovereign governments. If the states are not sovereign, can they make a legally binding contract? No. So if all we have to do is just simply lie down and accept whatever the federal government has to say about their own power, then we are not sovereign, we are colonies, which makes the Constitution an illegal document with no legal foundation, and it is dissolved, which means if the Constitution is dissolved, then our union is dissolved, and we are not a constitutional republic, but a totalitarian kingdom where the only limit to the federal government is its own desires and will. Here's the good news. The states are sovereign. The Constitution is legally binding. We are a constitutional republic, and the federal government is still legally insufficient to the states. And the only thing that needs to change is this, right here, a revolution of the mind. Because look at this word, reserved. To exercise dominion over something to the exclusion of all others. When we delegated power to the states in their creations on July 2nd, we said to the states, this is your power, and you have ownership over this power. It is your property to exclude everyone else. And when the states then created the federal government through the Constitution, they said, hey, we're going to delegate to our lower power a certain amount of our authority, and we're going to keep and protect the rest for ourselves. And that's what it means to be a constitutional republic. You live where the states are sovereign because the people created them that way. Where the states are the higher power and the federal government is the lower power. And we have temporarily entrusted the federal government with certain duties. And we have control over our employees. Gotta remember who we are, or there's no place to stand. How do you stand and defend your liberty if we cannot understand the greatest protector of our liberty is this check of the states on the federal government? Look at what Jefferson says. He says, whenever the federal government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. That is a very powerful thing. Let's look at this by way of analogy. My friend Debbie is sitting there on the front row, so I'm going to pick on her. Let's pretend that I have just stolen Debbie's car. Do I have the authority to drive Debbie's car? Do I have the authority to sell Debbie's car? If I sell Debbie's car, is it a legally binding sale? No. Why? Because the power has not been legally delegated to me, which means any act that I exercise over her vehicle is unauthoritative and it's void and of no force. Does Debbie have to sue me to get her car back? Absolutely not. She simply provides the title deed to the local officials. they have to present the car to her as the rightful owner of the vehicle. If I actually sold the car, the poor guy who bought it from me has the one who has to fight through the legal system for restitution to get money from me, not from her. Now here's the application question. Do the states have to sue the federal government to get their power back? No, they do not. Not only the states suing the federal government to get their power back is unnecessary, it's dangerous and ridiculous. The states suing the federal government to get their power back is like Debbie suing me to get her car back, showing up in court and finding out that the judge and the jury are all my family members. Right? Because the states are suing the federal government where? In federal court with judges that are appointed by? Come on now. That's not complicated. That's a stacked courtroom. Not only that, if the states are suing the federal government to get their power back, then they must submit to the fact that the federal government is the ultimate decider of the limits of their own power. And if the federal government says, no, I'm sorry, we believe our power is this today, then the only result that remains, the only option that remains for the state is to simply lay prostrate before the oligarchy and beg for mercy. See, all the states need to do is assert the title deed to their power. What is the title deed to their power? The Constitution. What we need to know, we need to change, is if the federal government uses power outside the Constitution, it is stealing power from the states. And it has no authority. Now, sometimes your federal supremacists will say, and I've had this come up all the time, where are my attorney friends? Okay. So I had a legislator say to me, yeah, but what about adverse possession? You're laughing, right? I said, well, adverse possession is a term of law. We actually have a legal definition for adverse possession and a legal allowance for adverse possession under specific terms. Can you show me in the Constitution where it legally establishes that the federal government can take power from the states as long as they can exercise it long enough without the states noticing? Does that sound ridiculous? See, there's a difference here that we need to come to terms with. A difference between legal authority and assumed authority. We're going to change the dynamics of our little analogy here to help us understand that a little bit better. We're going to pretend that Debbie has left on a vacation to the Bahamas for 3 weeks. She's very happy about that. The day she leaves for her vacation, I steal her car. So she's gone 3 weeks. She doesn't know I stole her car. I drive around for 3 weeks in Debbie's car. Everybody who sees me drive around in Debbie's car thinks that I have the legal authority to drive her car. Why? Because nobody's objected. They assume that I have the authority to drive her car. Does that make me have a legal authority because everybody thinks I do? No. Debbie comes home from her vacation, finds out that I stole her car, steps up and says, hey, you stole my car, I'm taking the keys back. See, that's what needs to happen in our states. We need to wake up and realize that the federal government has stolen our power, and we just must simply step up and assert our ownership and demand for the return of that power. Because just because they've been using it for 150 years doesn't mean they rightfully own it. What are our states supposed to be doing? We heard it come up here earlier. It's called interposition. What do? They're supposed to interpose. They're supposed to step directly in between the federal government and the rights of the people and say, no, you cannot exercise that power here, and you will not be allowed to exercise that power here because we will not comply. Look what Madison says. He says that the states have the right to interpose, but he says not only that, they have a duty to interpose. Why do they have can we all agree that a duty is greater than a right? We know we have a right to interpose because the powers are reserved. But why do they have a duty? Well, let's look at this. The Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. The only reason we created the government of the states or any government is to secure our rights. And when our states fail to step up to the federal government and keep them in their defined, limited powers, they are failing to accomplish the only reason they exist. Because securing our rights means we must have a limited and defined federal government. So when your state legislator says, well, you know, we can't oppose federal law, we can't do that, or we can't do this, then the next question out of your mouth should be, then why do we have you? Why do we even have state government? Why do we even have legislators? Why do we have an attorney general? Why do we have a governor if you're just going to admit that we're nothing but subjects of a colony? Because it's their job to keep you free men in a republic. How do they do that? Jefferson says nullification. Nullification, look what he says. The several states who formed the Constitution being what? Sovereign and independent. Don't forget that independent part, because there are people who will say that if Oregon is going to oppose the federal government, you must have 39 other states to agree with you or you can't oppose them. If you have to wait around for another state to agree with you, are you sovereign? Are you independent? No. And that it's nullification by those sovereignties. Who are the sovereignties? The states. What is nullification? It's simply saying, we will not comply. Can we try that together? We will not comply. Felt good, didn't it? That was God giving us a punctuation mark. See, it's not complicated. It's a matter of ownership. It's a matter of who possesses what and to what limit. Now, there are a bunch of different arguments against nullification, and we don't have time to go through them today. Some people try to tell you that the Supreme Court has ruled that the states can't nullify, and therefore they can't, which is really interesting because we've got to change the way we think about things. Can I just help us out here? Courts don't issue rulings. Kings issue rulings. Courts offer opinions. And a court's opinion is only binding under two circumstances. Number one, a court's opinion is only binding on the people in the courtroom, because otherwise it would be law. Courts can't issue law. If a court issues a law, that's a direct violation of separation of powers and a per se violation of the Constitution. Not only is a court's opinions only binding on the people in the courtroom, they're only binding on the people in the courtroom if they're consistent with the Constitution. So if they're inconsistent with the Constitution under Article 6, Section 2, then they're not binding on anybody at all. And when your federal supremacist friend tries to tell you that we must obey the Supreme Court, I want to ask them, this Supreme Court? The Supreme Court that said Dred Scott could not be a citizen of the United States because he was a black man? That Supreme Court? Or perhaps this Supreme Court? The Supreme Court that said that we could arrest and indefinitely detain American citizens, men, women, and children for 4 years just so we could feel safe. That Supreme Court, that's the one that we're supposed to trust with our rights and our liberties? See, we got to think about these things. Because look what Jefferson said. The great object of my fear is the federal judiciary. That body like gravity ever acting with noiseless foot and unalarming advance, gaining ground step by step and holding what it gains, is engulfing insidiously in the special governments into the jaws of that which feeds them. The government will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. By the way, just in case your federal supremacist or your judicial supremacist friend has forgotten, this Supreme Court justice, who's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, already said nullification is how you should be responding to the federal government. This is Justice Roberts' opinion in the first Affordable Care Act opinion. He says, "We look to the states to defend their prerogatives by adopting the simple expedient of not yielding to the federal blandishments when they do not want to embrace federal policies as their own." And then look what he says. The states are separate and independent sovereigns, and they have to act like it. Hey, Oregon, isn't it about time you start acting like it? Well, I just want us to realize a few things as we close up here today. Come on now, help me out. If the federal government is not defined by the Constitution, then why do we have one? If they can just make it up as they go along, then why do we even have a Constitution? If the federal government is not limited in its power by the Constitution, then what is the limit of the federal government's power? Because then we remember, once again, how many branches of government did we create? Legislative, executive, and judicial. If part of the whole, any part of the whole, can define the power of the whole, then what is the limit of the whole's power? Nothing but itself. What controls the federal government? The states. Nullification is not the states acting unlawfully, by the way. Nullification is the states enforcing the supreme law of the land when the federal government is acting lawlessly. And we need to start enforcing the law. Now here's the warning from Jefferson. The states must stand. Are you catching a theme here? The states must stand. When all government, domestic and foreign, in as little as great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another. Did you notice he said one government on another? He didn't say one branch on another. He said one government on another. Which government's supposed to be checking the other? The states, the creators of the federal government, are supposed to be checking their creation so that the creation cannot become superior to the creator. The lower power should never consume the higher power. And if it does, look what he says. If the states look with apathy on this silent descent of their government into the gulf which is to swallow all, we have only to weep over the human character formed uncontrollable but by a rod of iron. You see, the greatest gift that our framers gave to us was not liberty, because God gave that to us. The greatest gift that our framers gave to us was the ability to the opportunity to self-govern. You see, they didn't just declare independence from Great Britain. They declared independence from kings forever. And the greatest condemnation on America today is our refusal to self-govern. Now, we didn't get to go through all of these things. I want to prepare you as much as I can. The book on the back table that I have there, Sovereign Duty, has this class in it. It also has a class on the constitutional sheriff. It has a class on the Second and Fourth Amendments. It will teach you about nullification. It will teach you about the states. It will give you the tools necessary to stand when you find a federal supremacist that tells you, no, you can't stand against the federal government. Putting the tools in your hands. That's what we want to do today. It has nullification, it has Article 5 Convention in there, and it has everything that you need to know how to defend the sovereignty of the state. Now, I am very disappointed that I did not have this video working for you, because I was going to let LaVoy finish out the class for me and just simply reiterate that you must stand. Because you see, how many of you want your states to stand against the federal government? Who are the states? Your state will not stand against the federal government until you stand individually. We got to stop waiting for people to become our leaders. We got to stop waiting for somebody to fix our problems, and we must stand ourselves. Why? Because our children deserve a whole lot better than what we have today. And they certainly deserve a whole lot better than the direction we're heading in. And by the way, if we had stood together, can I just be really bold and brazen here today? If we had stood together from the beginning, it wouldn't have just been those men at the refuge. There would have been nobody arrested at the refuge. If you're waiting for Congress to fix this, why hasn't Congress impeached Anna Brown? Why hasn't Congress demanded that these agencies drop the charges on these men? And we have 4 or 5 executive orders already written by our new president. Why haven't these men been pardoned? I'm not casting stones at anybody. I'm just trying to tell us that if we're going to fix this, we've got to understand that the onus is on us and not waiting for somebody else to do what we need to do ourselves. So I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank the Finicum family. You've given the most ultimate of sacrifice. You've given us an example of standing. And if we don't stand, are we really saying that this family should have to sacrifice more than the rest of us? Are we really saying that these people don't deserve the comfort and ease that we deserve? Or are we just saying that the Finicum family loves liberty and their children more than we do? Because that's really the only conclusions that you can draw. We have the power. We've always had it. We have the means. We've always had it. We just need to change this. Thank you. Thank you. God bless.
Kris and Hall, folks. Kris, if you stay up there. Bill, Garrett, would you guys be a gentleman? Take your chair and a chair for the ladies. I mentioned that we would have a question and answer, and we will do that. I have a couple other announcements. If you have a bid on the silent auction item, that bidding will be done, and we will collect those as soon as we finish this panel discussion. So you have whatever period of time. If you want to generate questions, we're going to make that happen right here. Also, while we're making our way to the stage, the 7th and 8th graders from John Day that are going to Washington, D.C. have a 5-pound bag of salad for sale that you can go get for $5. They've got a half gallon of buttermilk, and they have 1 dozen glazed donuts. for a mere $10. So, if you have a question for one of our 4 panelists, I will ask you to come and look at me, and I will allow you to ask the question in the microphone. Don't try to take the microphone, you won't get it. I'm not looking for speeches, I'm looking for questions and respectful dialogue. So, we're there. Kris Ann will be back. If you have a question, we've got a question coming. Come on over here. I want you to tell me what your name is and where you're from, and state your question. Anyone has a question, line up right here, please. I'll hold the microphone. You missed that part.
Okay. My name is Kris McDonald. I'm from Medford, Oregon, and my question is, was it established that the Harney County Resource Center was indeed titled to the county? That was one of the questions that came up.
Okay, do you still have your microphone up there? Who wants to answer that question? Kate.
I didn't even hear the question.
No, I know, but I'm sorry. I didn't ask you. That was my fault.
Anybody know that?
I don't think we have anybody that can really address that.
Did anybody find that out?
We'll
The information was withheld.
What was the question again?
The question is, was the Harney County Resource Center indeed titled to the county?
No, it was talked.
Okay.
I can answer that.
No,
It was.
we'll discuss that one later. We need questions that pertain to these guests. You have a question?
I've been,
Name and where you're from, please.
my name's Carrie Matthews, I'm from Baker City, and I've been following the state of Jefferson, wanting to be the 51st state, and since Oregon is pretty much ruled by the west side, how would we be able to split off and become the 52nd state?
Is that for Kris Ann?
I also,
Thank you.
how many of you heard of the state of Jefferson? Okay, so basically what you have to do, it sounds sort of counterintuitive, but you have to petition your capital to let you go. Or you can revolt and leave. Okay? But basically if you want to do it legally within the realms of your constitution, then you will have to petition the capital to allow you to split. It's happened. Okay, we've had splits, we've had states become other states, and so it is possible to happen, but you have to. I believe that the state of Jefferson is in a very unique position to have a victory in that because of certain legal circumstances happening in California, which I won't get into details too, but that's how you do it.
Anybody
And
else?
good luck, I support you, because if you do it, then you make people think, right? Yeah.
Okay, anybody else want to comment on that? Okay, next question.
Maggie Rose McGrath. My question is kind of a legal question. Is if the federal judges up in Portland or in Las Vegas are deciding to disregard the Constitution, and they're basically telling the people, the defendants, that they cannot present certain evidence, and they're telling the jury to disregard some actual evidence that could clear their names, what can the people, or we the people, do to make sure we hold them accountable in the court of law, if it is a court of law?
I can start from the federal level. You should be demanding that your congressmen file articles of impeachment on these justices immediately. They should be impeaching them for bad behavior because they have the authority to do that.
Like Peter DeFazio, I don't think he would do that.
Okay, well, but you have to contact him and make him do it, and when he doesn't, then you publicize that he won't. And everybody in this room probably has a different representative, so you go to them as well.
Garrett?
Yeah, I think just as what Kris Ann's saying, that's the legal way to go about it, but there's power in the word. And so if you can spread the word, if you can use social media, that has become a big thing. You'd be surprised at how many things are changing because of the internet. This whole situation with LaVoy, it would have been presented a lot differently had there not been cameras and media and people being involved. If it had happened before technology was available, then they would have said that, yeah, they would have said, oh, well, LaVoy was shooting at us and we had to take him down. Well, once we have all this technology, once we have this ability to spread and to not be silenced, you know, we need to use it to the best of our ability.
How many of you knew that on Kellogg Community College, a federally funded college, that students were arrested and spent a night in jail for passing out pocket constitutions on campus? Okay, so what he said, you know what we did? We started a campaign to flood the president of that college's office with pocket constitutions. Yeah. So, I mean, these are the ways. I was saying the legal way, but you know what's even more fun is to annoy the mess out of them, right? Shut down their phones, fill up their post boxes with pocket constitutions, do whatever you can, because sometimes it's a lot more fun to just be annoying.
Annoy the mess is one word for it. Yes, sir. You're
Hey, Trent, can I make one quick comment here?
Go.
You know, Kris talks about a revolution of the mind. One thing with these justices, Supreme Court justices, federal court judges, when you ask anybody how long is the term of office for a Supreme Court justice, they'll tell you it's life. That does not exist in the Constitution. They are able to serve for good behavior, and that's it. And so just that mental change makes a big difference. When we think they're in there for life, we think they're superior. When we recognize it's good behavior, they're a bunch of children that we're allowing to play in a little playpen as long as they have good behavior. Bad behavior, they're out. So it's that revolution of the mind. I love that Kris uses that.
Next question.
My name is Scott Baird from Benicia, California. And by the way, I sent on Thursday Mark McConnell of Kellogg University, I sent him 10 pocket constitutions.
Woo! You have a question?
I do. Chad Davis, investigator for LaVoy's death, he refers to LaVoy as a militia member. How can he be claim to be so independent if he's claiming LaVoy's a militia member? How do you get to be a militia member other than the narrative of the media? How can he call him that?
Who wants to answer that question?
Media. Fake media's right there.
Kate?
Fake news.
Yeah, I was saying fake news.
Yeah. Fake news calling fake news. I mean, all they have to do is say it. They don't ever retract it. And if they do retract it, it's on the last page in a little blip on the back side of the paper. And that's what's so sad about it, is they can spin that information for so long. Look how long they took the exact same story, the exact same verbiage about the protesters, right? Armed, standoff, all of these words. Everybody had the exact same story. And it just kept going. I am sure there were people that wrote in to correct them. They did not correct themselves. That's the problem with media. I don't hate all media. I hate media that spins and continues to spin because it's irresponsible. That's what I don't like.
Let me mention something else. How many of you have ever heard of the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act? Okay. Representative Thornberry, a Republican in Texas, pushed forward the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. In the 1940s, Congress passed a law that said U.S. tax dollars could not be used to create propaganda that would be disseminated to the American people. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act repealed that. Then in the last NDAA of 2017, Congress is now funding its own media outlet, an alternative to Voice of America. So first they overturned the idea, the law that you can't use tax dollars to create propaganda for American people, and now they're creating their own broadcast company who will create and release government-approved news.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Gail Dixon from Burns. I'm a substitute teacher, and the other day in one of the classes, the kid asked me if I knew that D.C. was going to become a state. And I guess in their weekly reader it said that D.C. is trying to become a state, and that's against constitutional law, right? Anybody?
It is contrary to the Constitution. There has been a movement, however, in D.C. to make DC a state, but it is unconstitutional. But when is the last time that something being unconstitutional has ever limited Washington, D.C.?
Okay, thank you, young man.
I'll just jump in there. I think Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 can help define that as well.
Go, young man.
Yeah, Tim Smith from Harney County. Got two things. One is a follow-up for MPhilpot's comments about the upcoming BLM suit by the Finicum family. I think everybody, I'd like to say this here so everybody will understand how important that suit could be. The underlying issue we've had in almost all of these things that have happened is whether or not allotments are real property and a real asset. So we're hoping, and I hate to say this, but we're hoping that even though the family's got to go through the hell of this lawsuit, that everybody needs to get behind that because it needs to go all the way to the Supreme Court because it's a decision that we need to have made that these allotments are assets and they are real property. That's the underlying cause of a lot of this tension that's happened over the last period of time. The second thing is a question, and this is for Kris Ann. Kris Ann, I've seen a lot of these presentations. One of the things that seems to be missing in the explanation of what the intent of the Continental Congress was before it became our real Congress was explained in the resolution of 1780. Why does no one use that? The resolution of 1780, I'm sure you know what that was. Basically, it defined how the states west of the continental or the colonial states would come into being. So why don't it seems to be a good item to use. Why don't anybody use that in the explanation of what the intent of the real Congress was?
In regards to the BLM, my first hurdle was just getting them to recognize that I was the legal heir to that property after my husband was killed. They didn't want to recognize Arizona state community property laws. And so that was my first hurdle. They still don't want to recognize me. They don't want to apply their own rule of law. And they don't want me to use anything that would benefit me. So you're right. This has to go all the way. We cannot stop. And I know that my family is very committed because I felt that if, excuse me, I didn't stand and fight back this, that it would be worse for the next person in line.
Kris Ann.
Well, this class was not a class on the limitations of the federal government's ownership of land. I have a class on that. And so that's where that would be applicable. This was merely establishing the foundation of understanding what are the states, how was the federal government created, and what are the obligations of the state to keep the federal government limited. So, and basically this was a 90-minute class, and I only gave you 50 minutes of it. So there's another thing. The other thing we want to talk about here is, I don't know, this is not happening just in Oregon. How many of you heard about what's happening in Texas on the Red River? Well, in the Red River, the BLM has not, it's quite ironic, they're very hypocritical, right? So, Jeanette doesn't have inheritance rights, according to them. However, in Red River, the BLM is asserting that they have inheritance rights to land superior to the heirs to the estates. So, that's, here you go. When you have a people who believe that you are the ultimate arbiter of your own power, then you can just operate like you have no limits. Because who's going to tell you you're wrong?
Next question. I'll hold the mic.
Sorry, I'm not going to touch you. Anyway, I just wanted to say what you guys were talking about when we were talking about Anna Brown.
Your name and where you're from, please.
Sorry. I'm LaVoy Elliott, and I am from Portland, Oregon. I'm part of the Portland, Oregon team. Anyway, we've already done that. We've gone to the state. We've petitioned to have her disbarred, and it's just on deaf ears. But what my question, I just was asked to comment on that and see if you could maybe comment later. But my question is, what has really bothered me about the whole court system, sitting in there and listening to Judge Brown, and realizing what really bothers me about the judicial system is they can't make decisions based on the laws. what they do is they take each case and then they want to know examples of past cases and past rulings. And it's frustrating because I sit there and say, can't you make a decision? Are you that stupid? That, I mean, what did you learn in law school? That you can't stick to the laws and the rules and rule according to what the laws are. Why do you have to have examples?
Okay, so Chris Ann alluded to this earlier as well, but in law school, when you take a constitutional law class, you don't read the Constitution, you don't read the law, you just read what other, like Supreme Court justices or other courts say the law is, and they always use example. And so now we're not governed by constitutional law, but case law and precedent, and so that's why they do that, and that's not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to, you know, look at it in view of the Constitution and then do what upholds the constitutional principles. They're not doing that, but that's why. It's because all attorneys are trained in case law, not constitutional law.
The interesting thing is I teach 700 years of history prior to the Constitution, and 700 years of history proves that the first mechanism of all tyrannical government is a corruption of the court system, which is why Jefferson said what he said. And we're coming to this conclusion like it's some kind of brand new wheel we've invented when we should have been looking out for it all the time. It was always the courts that would be the end of our republic.
Next question.
I'm Jenna Brown from California, and I've read that President Trump couldn't pardon the Hammonds even if he wanted to, because the laws of pardons is that the person had to have been sentenced to at least 7 years and has to have served 3/4 of that 7 years to be pardoned. Is that correct?
Yeah, she said, she heard that somebody said Donald Trump couldn't pardon the Hammonds because you have to be sentenced to more than 7 years and you have to serve like 3/4 of the sentence. I missed that article, section, and clause, so if somebody wants to show me that in the Constitution, I would be interested in seeing that. It's possible that they've created some kind of legislation or some kind of procedure, but then again, it's not constitutional anyway. And if you'll remember, they were talking about Donald Trump pardoning Hillary Clinton before she even was found guilty of anything. So I think that's just an excuse somebody who didn't know any better told you.
Bill.
The pardon power is a very fascinating power, and the Constitution doesn't talk much about it because it needs to be completely free and open in order for the power to really exist. Basically what the pardon power is, it's the power for mercy to satisfy the demands of justice. And it's a very fascinating power because if we look at our religious doctrines, we have an individual that came to this earth that satisfied the demands of justice with mercy. It's that same power, so it has to be completely free and unbound. You can't have any restrictions. Otherwise, that ability for mercy to overcome justice just doesn't exist.
You know what the headline is in the news now tomorrow, Bill? Panel member just compares Donald Trump to Jesus. That's what you just said. All right. Next question. Oh, by the way, 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning on those 2 baskets of LaVoy's favorite items. If you want to bid on those, you have 2 minutes. Yes, sir.
My name's Tim Davis. I'm from Carrollton, Georgia, living out of Springfield, Oregon. My question's a little bit different than anything we've addressed tonight. I want to know why nobody's touching on the fact that the federal government has been arming and funding the Muslim armies all over this here world for years. $4 billion, $50 million they gave just a few short months ago to Hamas. The federal government is the #1 reason that ISIS grew in the strength that they did and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people in the Middle East. I don't understand why not very many Americans are addressing this. That's treason.
You need to come to my genealogy of the Constitution class, and you'll understand why then. This is just the mechanism of government. It's the way they've always operated. And other than, that sounds sort of trite, but it's actually true. It's just a common mechanism of the government to make deals with the enemies so that they can keep their own people under control.
I had a guest. I have about 400 guests a year, and a lot of my guests are whistleblowers. One named Eva Bartlett is a journalist, and I had her on my show, and she spent a lot of time down in Syria and talks about ISIS and the truth about what's going on in Syria, and it blew people's minds. And if you go to KateDalleyRadio.com, you can get all the podcasts, and that podcast is extraordinary because of the lies we're told in our press about Syria and who those white helmets are. I encourage you to go.
I encourage you to go. I also want to know how many people out there know that we created Al-Qaeda. Okay? So, same old thing.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Okay, next question.
I'm Roxana Ryan. I'm another one of the defendants that's up for the next 7 trials, for the next ones. And my question is, I've got a couple. One, would a class lawsuit, if all the defendants got together and did a class action lawsuit against Judge Anna Brown, would that be effective? And number 2, I am concerned Judge Anna Brown has denied these guys jury trial on the misdemeanor charges that they have added to the list of charges. And what can we do? Because according to the lawyers, there's nothing we can do.
I'll do the misdemeanor thing first. Here's the problem. This is another one of those things the Supreme Court said so, right? Which is directly in conflict with the 6th Amendment. Because the 6th Amendment says, in all criminal, right? In all. All means all. And what happened is the Supreme Court said, well, all doesn't mean all. All actually means you're going to spend more than a year in jail and you're going to have more than a $500 fine. And so what they say is because you're not going to spend more than a year in jail and you're not going to have to pay more than a $500 fine and a petty misdemeanor, then you don't get to have a trial by jury. But that, again, is another place where the Supreme Court is in direct contradiction with the Constitution of the United States. And that's not going to change until, once again, the mentality of the people change and we demand that we don't have judges that do that. So who wants to handle the class action thing? Because I am anti-litigious. You know?
So the Supreme Court has also established a lot of rules on how you can maintain a class action. I'm not familiar with the case law off the top of my head, but you have to have certain things. It has to be immediate harm, so they have, you just have to do a little research or get someone to do a little research to see what would be required with that. Other than that, we're still working under a case law driven judiciary, and so that's really how you have to play the game.
Next question. And we're going to have 5 more questions, and that'll be it.
My name is Clint Signer. I'm from Star, Idaho, and Kris, you were just talking about nullification, and that's a prerogative of the states, but the people in Eastern Oregon are in a tough spot. Their state capital has, zero chance they're ever going to try nullification there, so I'm wondering if there's any legal precedent for people just to form groups or counties, smaller groups to try and nullify laws, or if you have to do that through the state.
Oregon is nullifying federal law. You realize that, don't you? Oregon is nullifying federal law by legalizing marijuana. So here's the thing. What we need to do is make sure that we bring these understandings of liberty to both sides of the of the aisle. In Washington State, there's a great legislator. His name is Matt Shea. And Matt Shea started off by just having liberty legislation. And he has learned over 7 years that if you present the issue as liberty and not as party, that you can get both sides on board. Because here's the thing. Oregonians need to help convince their liberal side that they want to have state authority. And the way you do that is you say, look, if you have the authority and the federal government doesn't, then that gives you the power to be the nanny and not the federal government. That means you get more money to be more nanny and you get control. And that resonates with them. And on the conservative side, you say to them, look, you can, because they're supposed to be the liberty side, you can depart more liberty to the people. And then what happens is you get the debate happening where it's supposed to be happening, at the state level. And so whether you want to be liberty or nanny is not something decided upon you by the federal government, but decided by the people through their legislators. And so, you have to do it here. And I think just throwing up our hands and saying, well, they'll never do it, so what do we need to do? You can change your life with one sheriff. Okay? One sheriff will change your entire life, how things work. If there had been, and it is no lie, if there had been a constitutional sheriff, these men would have never gone to jail, period. I mean, look at Brad Rogers in Elkhart, Indiana. He kicked the FDA and the USDA out of his entire county. And that's the power of the sheriff. And the power of the people is even greater. Because what would have happened if everybody went to the refuge and said, no, you can't exercise jurisdiction over these people? What if everybody showed up at the courthouse or prevented their arrest and said, no, you cannot exercise jurisdiction over the people? That is not an unprecedented act. Our states came together during the Civil War and refused to enforce the Federal Fugitive Slave Act and kicked the federal government out of their states and said, no, you don't have jurisdiction over these people. They are free here.
Okay, here are the 3 people who have won the silent auction. You can go pick up your items. Get to know the man, Kristen Thomas, Prineville, that's yours. For a mere $130. David Byrne, Norris, Montana, $200 for Get to Know the Man, the other one. And the Rattlesnake donated, Mike Perino. You have won that for $455, and that was a donation today. So thank you to those individuals. You can go pick that up. All right, I got just a couple more questions. You're up, sir. I'll hold the mic.
Hi, I'm Jimmy O'Hagan. I'm from Grayling, Washington. And I'd like to start off by thanking all the people that came here today and that came to the town hall meetings in Burns. We filled the fairgrounds in Burns, we filled the high school, we filled the stadium. The people are hungry for what we're doing here today. But what I'd like to point out is we can't fix the problem without identifying the problem. We need to identify the problem. And the problem is we need to follow the money. Who's making money off from stealing your life, liberty, and property? Attorneys are making money off of stealing your life, liberty, and property. And it's the violation of the separation of powers that is causing the problem. We have attorneys in the legislative branch and the executive branch, and they're making laws to benefit attorneys to steal your life, liberty, and property. And until we address the violation of separation of powers and throw the attorneys out of the legislatures and the executive branches, there's going to be more laws made to take your life, liberty, and property. Now, I'd like to address a question to our attorney up here.
I have 2.
Okay, they understand that the Supreme Court has ruled it is criminal to violate the separation of powers. And
Supreme Court doesn't issue rulings, they issue opinions.
Okay, opinions. But now the attorneys that are sitting there, and they understand it's criminal to violate the separation of powers, but they will not stand up and point out to their legislators.
Need a question.
Will you stand up to your legislators and your executive branches and say, will you not act in omission? Will you stand up and say it is a criminal act for all the legislatures to violate the separation of powers, and you're in treason when you're doing it?
Are you asking me personally? Because I'm pretty sure I do that every single day when I teach every class that I teach.
Tell you the truth, I'd fuck.
Name, address.
Sorry, address. Officer.
You got to get on the list properly.
Robert Jones. I'm from Nampa, Idaho, and I probably would like to ask you guys 1,000 questions, but I'm trying to peacefully resist the best that I can. I've been arrested for doing so. I'm actually fighting a case right now. But what I have a hard time with is when you get these public pretenders, they come in and they always want you to plea bargain, and they won't submit the motions that I want them to submit. They just, oh, that's not going to work. That's constitutional crap. Really? And I can't get them to do it, so I'm trying to do it myself, but I got to tell you, it's really hard. I type really slow. I don't know how to spell. is there any resource that once you've begun that fight and, you know, they've come after you, because actually this is like my third time in these courts, and usually gets dropped down to like next to nothing. And, you know, the judge is the jury, so they find me guilty. The other one I did get, I took a plea bargain.
I think what we need, what my best advice to you was to pick your battles wisely and find an avenue where you can have pro se counsel. There are lots of First Amendment law firms out there. You've got the Thomas More, you've got Liberty Counsel, you've got ADF, and so stick in the constitutional realm. Not knowing what your cases are all about, we don't have time to get into that. It's difficult to give very specific advice on that. You always have the right to be pro se, to represent yourself, but we do have to recognize that the system is rigged so that everybody's on the same team. So think about this. You have the legislators who are making the laws, their government, right? Then you have the people who are enforcing the laws, they're paid by the government too. Then you have the people who are prosecuting the laws, they're paid by the government too. You have the judge who's sitting on the bench, he's paid by the government too. And if you can't afford an attorney, you're going to have a public defender that is going to be working for you that's paid by the government too. So that's why we have the jury trial system, because in a system where everybody's on the same team, your only real check and balance is a jury.
Garrett, anything to add? Okay, thank you. Next, I'll hold the microphone.
I'm Tom Lewis, Albany, Oregon. And this county has a sheriff who is a constitutional sheriff, yet there are still a large number of federal lands in this county, such as the national forests and the Grande Fossil beds. How much power does a sheriff have to evict the federal government from the federal lands in a county such as this?
The sheriff has as much power as the people will support him to exercise.
That's easy enough, wasn't it? All right, young man, you're up. And don't grab that microphone.
Grab the microphone. So, do you realize...
Let everybody know who you are.
I'm me. I reside
Who are you?
Here. Who do you say I am?
Name.
Who do you say I am? My name is me.
Okay, let's get to a question, please.
So do you realize that currently on the 14th in the trial that's happening now, what they're basically doing is creating case law where they try misdemeanors without a jury and then execute criminal forfeiture based on their decision. And the way that it affects Oregon the most, considering they've nullified federal enforcement with marijuana laws, they can then charge you with a federal misdemeanor of possession or whatever of marijuana and then do a civil forfeiture on you just based on their own ruling. And they're creating that case law right now in the current trial.
True. What was the question?
Well, the question was, did you know that?
Yes.
The second question is, what would you recommend the state of Oregon or even the people in this room do to stop that?
Same things that we've talked about before. It really is a stacked deck, and they stack the deck in the favor of the player who holds all the cards. So the only way to do it is get the people involved. It's use social media, whatever it is, flood the courtroom, and flood the courtroom. Flood the courtroom.
Get a lot of people involved. Next question.
And we were talking up here, one of the things that we need to understand that impeachment doesn't even have to be successful. The threat of impeachment is a very good tool as well. Problem is we have some people who run around and say, why impeach if we can't be successful? Well, if you never even try, then there is no threat.
So Thomas Jefferson, he talks about the involvement of the people. He said if the people are involved, he said even if they're wrong, even if the people are in error about a particular issue, just their involvement will have the effect of keeping the government within its original principles. And so just our involvement and engagement can have some success, even if we're way off on the issue, even if we're just loony cases about whatever. Our involvement will have an effect and can have a positive effect, according to Jefferson.
Hi, Rachel Gazzetti from Elko, Nevada. Jeanette, God bless you. Thank you for doing this, being here. Thank you to all of you for speaking. Very interesting, great to listen to. Kate, how do we hear your radio show in Elko, Nevada? Travis is on there.
Sure. I know that was a bit confusing too. I have a live 3-hour show every single day. Kris Hall is a guest every single Wednesday. I get that blessed. Yeah, she's amazing. So I have 9 different co-hosts that join me with all different ideologies. The conversations are lively. You can go to katedalleyradio.com and you can listen to so many of the shows that are posted. Also, you can live stream at foxnews1450.com. I am a Fox News affiliate. I'm the only one in that region. And so it's on foxnews1450.com to stream the show. You can do it on the TuneIn app. It's 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock every single day. And also, it's in Chicago, Tampa, Denver, Miami, and Salt Lake. And 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock Mountain. And then I'm also in Central. And then I'm also in Eastern live. So all those, and I'm on satellite. So if you don't have my show at your local station, just call them. And it's really easy. If they hear from you, they will actually do the show. They'll put the show on because it's on satellite. So it's really easy, and I really appreciate that question. Thank you.
Robert Finicum. Robert.
Hi.
She's on the Blaze Radio too on Saturdays.
I enjoyed this evening. My question is, I live in Flathead.
Your name?
My name's Nicholas Ramlow, and I live in Flathead County, Montana. And I heard a lot about nullification. What am I supposed to take from this presentation back to Flathead County and do tomorrow to improve the lives of the people that are there? There's 93% of the lands in Flathead County are public lands.
Well, if I can just start, the best thing you can do is take back the education that you learned and start sharing it with other people. Education is the only real means of liberation, and most of the people I see don't realize that they have something that they can do because they don't even know there's something they can do. And you've learned here today not only what's wrong, but there are things that you can do. There's lots of resources. LaVoy's got books, I've got books, DVDs. There's lots of things that you can take home and help you train others and train yourself. Share on, if you're in social media, share it. Just start getting educated. Kate has radio shows. I have radio shows. There's all kinds of things that we can do to educate ourselves. And I love, and I thank you for that, because that is my payment for being here today. Knowing that you want to go back and start bringing this to your people. Why don't you organize a training session for Center for Self-Governance, or have me come to your community and train? A very wise man said to me one time, it's always somebody else's fight until you get punched in the eye. We just have to make people realize you've been punched in the eye for 150 years. It's time to stop.
I just want you guys to know that Kris Hall travels the country at her own expense. I know she doesn't want me to say this, but she does. She funds her entire trip. She does, 250 of those a year. So you can imagine how many days out of the year she is gone. She funds it herself. She educates herself. I mean, she goes and educates people on her own. That is extraordinary to me. It's amazing. We need more people like this. I love it.
I would also say, go and educate your sheriff. And if he's not willing to change, then run for sheriff yourself or elect someone who will change.
Bill, final word.
So education absolutely is the way to go. But the other thing to make sure that you're doing when you go and are getting educated is recognize your own human nature. Just like my daughter Lane talked about, we all have the human nature to either gravitate toward democracy, mob rule, or monarchy. And it's in us all. And so we have to train ourselves to get away from that in order to live in our republic. So that's really the best thing. Go get educated and recognize that we've got to put off the natural man and train ourselves to learn how to live in a liberty.
Jeanette?
Again, thank you for coming, and weren't they wonderful? Aren't they true educators of the principles of liberty? I am so grateful that they took the time to come and share this with you. And I'm grateful that you took the time to come and spend it with us. And God bless you all. And I think my son is right here somewhere.
Robert is right there. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just close with one little thought. 3 words that we started with today as a summary of what we just heard is the most important thing to take home. Because that's the question everybody has. What do we take home? We, the people. Thank those individuals for taking their time to come and join us and remind us that we have the power. That's where you applaud. Yeah, good.
Okay, everybody, we're going to pray.
Robert Finicum with your benediction.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be gathered here together as friends, as families, and as lovers of freedom. We are especially grateful for all those who have sacrificed their time and their resources to help support this. Father, we pray that we can take the spirit of liberty and of freedom that we felt within our hearts and to let that guide our lives and the choices that we make. Help us to spread this message of freedom for our families and for our posterity, and that we can make steps to heal this country. And as we do so, to act in love and in compassion, especially as we work with those that may not agree with us and who may mistreat us. And we are so thankful to have this opportunity to live in such a promised land, and bless us as we seek to keep this land holy and safe and free. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Be safe. Thank you for coming.